I'd love to talk now a little bit more about the big ideas that are circulating in Palladium. I think that gives people a good sense of what Palladium is, how it functions, and how you all have built this unique machinery to sustain yourselves and also to hopefully in the long run have the larger impacts that you want to have. So I'd love to now unpack a little bit some of the themes that revolve around governance futurism. And specifically, a lot of people today are talking about things like charter cities or cloud countries or the network state. People might have heard of all of these terms, and it seems to be definitely an idea that's in the air, both intellectually, but also in terms of startups. There are lots of people who are just thinking in this direction. It to me, it rhymes a lot with the Palladium vision. It rhymes a lot with governance futurism, and I think it is something that you have been paying attention to and you've been thinking about. So I'm curious, when you look at this moment and all of the different projects out there that are trying to work on something like this, for people listening, all I'm referring to is basically what it all revolves around is some vision of basically creating new forms of sovereignty that kind of somehow emerge from whether it's the internet or crypto, or it's this kind of meme or vision that a lot of people have where digital technology seems like it's hitting a critical mass where new forms of sovereignty are going to emerge. So instead of, taking over the US government and making it better, it's more like there's this mental model a lot of people have where just new forms of exit, new forms of micro political structures will emerge and grow, and maybe that's going to be the thing that changes the world or solves our governance problems. I know you have some thoughts on this. Like, what do you see as how do you diagnose this? Like, is this promising? Do you think that these projects are any of these going to succeed, or are you more bearish on it?
Yeah, so this is a great question. As you correctly identify, I think Palladium kind of comes from that milieu, at least sort of demographically. A lot of those people are just our friends, so a lot of the impulses behind that are very much shared, right? That's all coming out of kind of seeing the problems with the current order, seeing the decay, seeing the need for something new, seeing the power of kind of more futuristic type of thinking, seeing the power of paradigm shifts. All this stuff very much shared with us, very much coming out of that same milieu. That said, we are very, we're pretty contrarian in this space. At least I think we're not very contrarian relative to kind of overall, historical thought. But basically, like early on, we criticized charter cities. That we had an article. Not that it was a bad idea, but that it won't produce decentralized government. It won't be producing the new government modes. So on charter cities in particular, our thesis was basically these things are done on territory. They are done by territorial states. They need the backing of territorial states. They will be done for the purposes of territorial states, especially the big ones that are more secure in their political order so that they're able to do these kinds of experiments. So, and that's why, 9 times out of 10, the things that look like charter cities are being done by China, right? The things that are cited as these examples of like, oh, look, they're doing this, kind of legally, special economic zone or some new project or something. It's 9 times out of 10, there's some project by China. It's because China is a big territorial state that wants to be doing experiments for its own purposes. And so we sort of had that thesis is like, look, guys, don't forget the fundamentals here. Power is the fundamentals, power and empires. And that really is what drives history. So, and then on things like, decentralized network states, crypto, the internet, all that stuff. I mean, again, like we're very optimistic about where these things can go, what they can do. But again, we take this sort of contrarian point of view there. It's like, no, actually, the internet is not going to lead to this decentralization, a political decentralization. It's not going to lead to a lot of to a new form of sovereignty that's smaller. In fact, it's going to lead to a new form of sovereignty that's much bigger and more centralized. Like, this is the major effect of what's happening with the internet, is actually that everything becomes more legible to established bureaucracies, to established power networks. And, I think people think a little bit clearer when they look at China about these things. Is China going to be decentralized because of the internet? Well, no, it's not. They definitely have a handle on it, and they know how to manage public discourse. They are learning how to manage public discourse. They run, people are often accusing them of running this big surveillance state that's very repressive, et cetera, et cetera. I think this is just people having clarity about what the internet fundamentally is, and having some anxiety about that. But I don't think that's different between China and, let's say, the West. I think the same fundamentals are playing out in the West. What we're seeing is more homogenization of discourse, more control of discourse, editorial control from the top level, more total volume of discourse, more perhaps even functionality of discourse. There's more voices happening, more things possible, more people are able to talk to each other than before, but also the thing is more managed. And so I really think that all these new technologies, and this analysis actually transfers over to many other kind of technological new things happening in technology. It basically, I expect that a lot of this stuff is mostly going to be centralizing. That said, I think it will also probably disrupt the current models that we have of governance. Most of those obviously formed for the TV era and the for an era before sort of modern internet powered marketing. I think the previous sort of era definitely was formed with marketing, which was an example of this previously, and everyone I think recognizes that it did homogenize things. But I think that's with internet powered marketing, it's going to go a level further, and we're going to get new forms of political power out of that. But the actual result is larger and more powerful empires, not smaller and less powerful empires.
Interesting.
And
okay.
And then, yeah, I mean, if you'll let me keep going, I have also a response on this question of like sort of decentralized network states or non-states, kind of sovereign collectives, ideas like that. I think something I've brought up here previously before is I think those things are possible. There are good examples of them. For example, I think the Ismaili Muslims I've brought up previously, and they have diplomatic relations as a quasi-state entity. They have their people are very much bought into this big network that they have. They have businesses. They have a whole kind of economic empire. They have a political empire. They have their own philanthropic empires. They have all kinds of stuff going on. They're spread across many different countries, but they are a religion. And I think that's something that people need to appreciate, is that at that level of sort of rarefaction of your network state, you need some new force that's holding it together. And I think in this case, it's they're very dedicated to some particular quasi-ethnic religious identity, and that can really bind something together. I think without that, if it's just kind of particular modes of economic interaction that they're using, I think what happens is, if that works, it rapidly takes over the world and everyone uses it. And if it doesn't work, well, it doesn't work. So out of crypto, for example, in these sort of crypto network states, there may be things that happen, especially temporarily, in this sort of decentralized internet sovereignty sense. But I think in the long term, it either becomes the new empire or it fails.